At the remote Naval Special Warfare Training Facility, a woman appears without warning. Her uniform hangs slightly loose, hiding something beneath the fabric. The recruits barely notice her at first, this quiet presence among their ranks. She takes their mockery in silence. She accepts their challenges without complaint. But when one of them goes too far, grabbing her notebook filled with combat diagrams no trainee should know, everything changes in an instant. The speed of her response leaves them frozen. They have no idea who she really is or why she's there, and they're about to find out the hard way. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, consider subscribing for more untold military stories that reveal the quiet professionals who serve without recognition. Commander Thorne Blackwood stood at the window of his office, watching the sun rise over the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in San Diego. The sky burned orange and gold, casting long shadows across the obstacle course, where recruits would soon be pushing their bodies to the breaking point. 25 years in the SEALs had taught him to appreciate these quiet moments. They never lasted long. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, not turning from the window. Lieutenant Commander Reeve Tiernan entered, a sealed manila envelope in his hands. The younger officer's normally confident demeanor seemed subdued. "Sir, this just came through on the secure channel, eyes only." Blackwood took the envelope, noting the highest level classification markings. He dismissed Tiernan with a nod and waited until the door closed before breaking the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. As he read, his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Anyone who didn't know him might have missed it entirely. But the contents of that folder had just changed everything about the current training rotation. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number from memory. "This is Blackwood. Lazarus Protocol is active. She arrives today." He hung up and looked one more time at the photograph. A woman in combat gear, face partially obscured by shadow and desert dust, standing amid the wreckage of what had once been an embassy. Her right leg was bandaged, but she stood straight, still holding her weapon. He slipped the photo back into the envelope and locked it in his desk. Class 238 had no idea what was coming. The morning fog still clung to the base when Zaira Naji arrived. She came alone, carrying a single duffel bag over her shoulder. Her olive skin was weathered by sun and wind, a small scar near her right temple, the only obvious mark of her past. The standard-issue uniform hung slightly loose on her athletic frame, as though it had been deliberately chosen a size too large. At the processing center, the desk sergeant looked up with the bored expression of a man who'd seen thousands of recruits pass through. "Name and authorization?" "Naji, Zaira." Her voice was quiet but clear. The sergeant tapped at his computer, frowning. "Not seeing you on any roster for this rotation." Without speaking, Zaira reached into her pocket and produced a sealed envelope with classified markings. The sergeant's eyes widened slightly as he took it, noting the highest level security classification. Inside was a single card with a code that he entered into his system. His screen immediately displayed a security protocol he'd never seen before. The sergeant's demeanor changed instantly. He stood straighter, almost at attention. "My apologies, ma'am. I wasn't informed of your arrival. Your quarters have been prepared in Building C, Room 12. It's private, as requested." Zaira took back the envelope and nodded once. "Thank you, Sergeant." "Do you need an escort to the barracks, ma'am?" "I know my way around," she said, shouldering her bag again. As she walked away, the sergeant watched her with newfound curiosity. Her gait was smooth and measured, but there was something unusual about it, something he couldn't quite place. He picked up his phone to report the unexpected arrival, unaware that he was being watched through the facility's security cameras by Commander Blackwood himself. SEAL Training Class 238 was already 2 weeks into their advanced training rotation. The 20 men had survived Hell Week and the brutal months of basic underwater demolition, SEAL training that followed. They'd proven themselves among the top 0.5% of naval recruits. Each morning, they told themselves the same thing. They were the elite. They were also merciless toward anyone they perceived as an outsider or weakness in their ranks. At the head of the formation, Lieutenant Archer Frost led the group in their morning PT. Tall, blonde, and naturally athletic, Frost came from 3 generations of Navy officers. His father had been a SEAL, as had his grandfather. Excellence wasn't expected in his family. It was the baseline. "Pick it up, Thatch," He called to a stocky, dark-haired man struggling at the back of the formation. "My grandmother moves faster than that." Petty Officer Callum Thatch gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Unlike most of the men here, he didn't come from money or military legacy. He'd grown up in a Pennsylvania coal town where options were limited to the mine, the mill, or the military. He'd chosen the last and fought tooth and nail for his place here. Between them in the formation was Ensign Ryland Soto, moving with the efficient precision that characterized everything he did. The son of a physics professor and a surgeon, Soto approached special warfare like a complex equation to be solved. Every movement was calculated, every decision based on precise analysis of the odds. Watching from the side of the track was Chief Petty Officer Talon Mercer. At 34, he was older than most of the class, with 3 combat deployments already under his belt. He'd come to SEAL training, after 8 years as a rescue swimmer, bringing with him both experience and a deep suspicion of anyone who hadn't proven themselves in the real world. As the formation rounded the track for their final lap, a new figure appeared at the starting line. Zaira stood quietly, dressed in the same PT uniform as the men, her hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She began stretching, her movements economical and practiced. The class finished their lap, breathing hard, and immediately noticed the intruder in their space. Whispers spread through the ranks as they took in the woman preparing to join them. "Who's that?" "Must be admin staff." "Why is she in our PT gear?" "Is this some kind of joke?" Lieutenant Commander Tiernan approached the formation, clipboard in hand. If he was surprised by Zaira's presence, he didn't show it. 10-minute water break, then obstacle course, he announced. As the men dispersed, he nodded briefly to Zaira, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the recruits. Frost wiped sweat from his forehead and watched as the woman began a solo lap of the track, her pace steady and controlled. "What's the story with the new girl, sir?" he asked Tiernan. The officer glanced at Frost. "Focus on your own training, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir. Just wondering if there's been a change to the program." "The program changes as needed, Frost. That's your first lesson today." When they assembled at the obstacle course, Zaira quietly took a position at the back of the formation. No one had introduced her, and she offered no introduction of her own. This only fueled the speculation and resentment among the men. "Begin!" Tiernan shouted, and the first recruits launched themselves at the course. One by one, they attacked the obstacles, scaling walls, crawling under barbed wire, swinging across mud pits, and climbing rope nets. Each man pushed himself to the limit, knowing that his performance was constantly being evaluated. When Zaira's turn came, the remaining recruits watched with undisguised curiosity and skepticism. She approached the first obstacle without hesitation, her movements fluid and assured. Despite her smaller frame, she cleared the wall with ease, using momentum and technique rather than raw strength. As she progressed through the course, even the most critical observers had to admit she moved well. There was an economy to her actions, a precision that suggested extensive training. She never hesitated, never wasted energy, and never made a sound beyond her controlled breathing. When she finished, her time was among the top 5 of the day. She wasn't the fastest, but she'd outperformed most of the class without appearing to push herself to her limit. Frost, who'd posted the best time, watched her with narrowed eyes as she took a small drink of water and showed no signs of the exhaustion that marked the other finishers. "Must be nice to join halfway through," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Some of us have been here since hell." "Weak." Zaira met his gaze but said nothing, her expression neutral. After a moment, she turned away and began to clean the mud from her boots with methodical precision. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Frost persisted, stepping closer. Tiernan appeared between them. "Problem, Lieutenant?" Frost straightened. "No, sir. Just introducing myself to our new classmate." "Then consider the introduction made. Showers, then tactical planning in 30 minutes. As the class dispersed, Mercer found himself walking near Zaira. He studied her gait with professional curiosity. There was something there, a nearly imperceptible irregularity in her stride. Most wouldn't notice it, but Mercer had spent years evaluating injured swimmers. "That's a nice pace you keep," he said, his tone carefully neutral. Zaira glanced at him, her expression giving away nothing. "Thank you, Chief." "You've done this course before?" "Something like it." "Where did you train before this?" She looked straight ahead. "Here and there." Mercer nodded, recognizing the deflection for what it was. "Well, Welcome aboard, I guess, though you might want to watch yourself. Not everyone here is thrilled with last-minute additions to the class. I've noticed, she said, then added after a pause. I appreciate the warning, Chief. When she split off toward Building C instead of the main barracks, Mercer's curiosity only deepened. The private quarters in C were typically reserved for visiting instructors or VIPs, not trainees. In the barracks shower, speculation about the newcomer had reached a fever pitch. Has to be some diversity initiative, said one recruit. No way she qualified through regular channels. She moved pretty well on the course, Soto observed, always the analyst. So what? Frost retorted. The obstacle course isn't combat. It's not even close. Did you notice Tiernan with her? Almost like he knew her, Thatch added. Soto frowned. And she's not staying in the barracks. I saw her heading to Building C. Officer country, Mercer confirmed as he entered. Private rooms. This new information only fueled the resentment. By the time they assembled for the tactical planning session, a clear divide had been established. Zaira Naji was an outsider, and Class 238 closed ranks against outsiders. The afternoon session took place in a windowless classroom. Maps and tactical displays covered the walls, and each desk had a sealed packet of operation parameters. Zaira took a seat near the back, alone. She'd changed into a clean uniform, her hair still damp from the shower. As the other recruits filed in, none chose to sit near her, leaving an island of empty desks surrounding her position. Commander Blackwood entered, and the room snapped to attention. "Be seated," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who never needed to shout to be heard. "Today we're running Operation Sandstorm, urban extraction under hostile conditions." He activated the main display, showing satellite imagery of a mock town used for training exercises. You'll be divided into 4 teams. Each team has a different insertion point and a different asset to extract. You'll plan your approach over the next 2 hours, then execute tonight under darkness with simulated hostile forces in play. His eyes scanned the room, finally landing on Zaira. Nothing in his expression changed, but several recruits noticed the brief focus of his attention. Lieutenant Commander Tiernan will assign teams. I expect creative solutions that prioritize mission success and minimize casualties. Remember, in the real world, there are no do-overs. As Blackwood left, Tiernan began calling out team assignments. When he reached the final team, he paused. Team 4, Soto, Thatch, Mercer, and Naji. Soto, your team lead. The 3 men exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from Soto's calculating assessment to Thatch's open dismay. For the next 2 hours, the teams worked separately, developing their approach plans. Team 4 gathered around a table, maps and building schematics spread before them. Our insertion point is here, eastern approach, Soto said, pointing to the map. Asset is located here, 2nd floor of the central building. Intel suggests 6 to 8 hostiles with unknown weaponry. Limited cover on the approach, Thatch observed. They'll see us coming, unless we create a diversion. Traditional approach would be to split the team, Mercer added. 2 for the diversion, 2 for the extraction. Throughout this initial discussion, Zaira remained silent, studying the materials with focused attention. You have any thoughts? Soto finally asked her directly. Or are you just here to observe? Zaira looked up. I was considering the sewage tunnels, she said quietly, pointing to a maintenance schematic most had overlooked. They run directly beneath the target building. Less exposure, more surprise. The 3 men looked at the schematic with new interest. Tight quarters, Mercer said, and it would be slow going. But they wouldn't expect it, Thatch admitted grudgingly. It's worth considering, Soto concluded, clearly reassessing his initial impression of their new teammate. As they continued planning, Zaira offered a few more observations, each precise and tactically sound. She never pushed her ideas, simply presented them as options to consider. Gradually, a plan took shape that incorporated elements of her approach with Soto's more traditional tactics. When planning time ended, the teams presented their approaches to Tiernan for approval. Team 4's plan was notably different from the others, combining conventional tactics with unexpected elements that clearly caught the instructor's attention. Inventive approach, Team 4, Tiernan commented. Execution will be challenging. We're up for it, sir, Soto responded confidently. We'll see tonight, Tiernan said. Dismissed until 2100 hours. Get some rest. You'll need it. with several hours. Before the night exercise, the class dispersed for dinner and preparation. Zaira sat alone in the mess hall, a notebook open beside her tray. She ate methodically while making notes and small diagrams in the book. Across the room, Frost watched her with his team. "What's she writing over there? Taking notes on all of us?" "Maybe she's a plant," suggested one of his teammates, "sent to evaluate the class." "For what?" "We've already passed all the official evaluations." "Could be psychological assessment," another offered. "See how we integrate unusual elements." Frost snorted. "Well, I'm not playing along with whatever game this is." He stood. "Let's find out what she's really doing here." Despite the misgivings of some of his teammates, Frost led a small group across the mess hall toward Zaira's isolated position. She continued writing, apparently unaware of their approach until they surrounded her table. "So, what's your story?" Frost asked, his tone just short of openly hostile. "You're not on any roster I've seen." Zaira looked up, her expression calm. "Just a temporary assignment. Nothing interesting." "Temporary assignment," Frost repeated skeptically. "In the middle of advanced SEAL training, that's not how this works." "Apparently it is," she replied, returning her attention to her notebook. The dismissal angered Frost, but Thatch was more interested in the notebook itself. He moved suddenly, reaching across to grab it before she could react. "Taking notes on us? Planning to report back to admin?" he asked, flipping through the pages. What he found wasn't what he expected. The notebook contained detailed combat tactics diagrams, angles of fire calculations, and notes in what appeared to be Arabic. The level of sophistication in the tactical analyses went well beyond standard SEAL training. Before anyone could really process what they were seeing, the notebook disappeared from Thatch's hands with startling speed. Zaira had reclaimed it in a movement so fluid that it took them all a moment to realize what had happened. "I wouldn't," she said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been present before. The group fell silent, surprised by both her speed and the sudden shift in her demeanor. There had been no aggression in her movement, just pure efficiency and a skill level that didn't match their assumptions about her. Frost recovered first, forcing a laugh. "Looks like admin has a temper. You should go," she said, her voice even. "We're not done talking," Frost insisted. "Yes," she replied, looking directly into his eyes for the first time. "We are." Something in her gaze made him hesitate. It wasn't anger or fear, it was assessment. The look of someone cataloging weaknesses. Mercer, who had been observing from nearby, stepped in. "Let's move out, gentlemen. We've got an op tonight. Focus on that." As they walked away, the men were unusually quiet, processing what they'd just seen. "Did you see those diagrams?" Mercer asked, softly. "That wasn't standard protocol." "And the Arabic," Soto added, fluent from the look of it. "So she knows some tactics and speaks a language," Frost dismissed. "Doesn't make her one of us." But doubt had crept in, and they all felt it. They'd just been offered a glimpse of something that didn't fit their narrative about the quiet woman in the oversized uniform. Back at her table, Zaira watched them leave, then touched a spot behind her ear, activating a concealed communication device. "First contact made," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Assessment beginning." In the command center, Commander Blackwood received her transmission and smiled faintly. Class 238 had no idea what they were dealing with. That would soon change. The next morning, the class gathered for weapons assembly training. The night operation had gone relatively well for most teams, though Team 4's unorthodox approach had yielded mixed results. The sewage tunnel access had provided the element of surprise Zaira had predicted, but the tight quarters had slowed their extraction more than anticipated. In the cold light of day, assessment of the operation was brutally honest. Team 4, your extraction time was 30 seconds over acceptable parameters, Tiernan announced. In a real operation, that could mean the difference between extraction and body bags. Soto nodded, accepting the criticism professionally. "Understood, sir. We'll improve." Tiernan moved on. "Today we're focusing on weapons proficiency. Each of you will disassemble, clean, reassemble, and function check your assigned rifle against the clock." The class broke into stations, each recruit working with practiced precision on their weapon. Years of training had made these movements second nature for most of them. At her station, Zaira worked quietly, her movements methodical. Frost, whose station was adjacent, watched her from the corner of his eye. When Tiernan stepped away to consult with another instructor, Frost made his move. With a subtle movement, he reached over and flipped a small spring in Zaira's disassembled rifle, reversing its orientation. It was a petty sabotage that would prevent the firing pin from engaging properly when reassembled. A small thing, but enough to make her fail the function check. Zaira gave no indication that she'd noticed the interference. She continued her work at the same steady pace. "Naji, you're up for demonstration," Tiernan called, returning to the group. All eyes turned to her station as she was called forward to reassemble her weapon in front of the class. Frost and a few others exchanged subtle glances, anticipating her failure. Without hesitation, Zaira began to reassemble the rifle. Her hands moved with confident precision, each component slotting perfectly into place. When she reached the firing mechanism, she paused briefly, then removed the spring that Frost had tampered with. She reversed it to its proper orientation and continued the assembly, aiming without comment. The entire process took less than 55 seconds, well under the standard time. She completed the function check flawlessly, the rifle operating exactly as designed. "Satisfactory, Naji," Tiernan said, though his tone suggested it was more than merely satisfactory. As she returned to her station, Frost stared at her in disbelief. She had not only noticed his sabotage, but had corrected it so smoothly that most wouldn't have realized anything was wrong. "Where had admin learned to do that?" he asked, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Zaira glanced at him, the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. "Books, mostly." But Mercer, watching closely, noticed the calluses on her hands. Not the fresh calluses of recent training, but the hardened, years-old markings of someone who had handled weapons professionally for a very long time. Across the room, Tiernan shared a knowing glance with Commander Blackwood, who had entered silently during the demonstration. The commander observed the class with the patient assessment of a man who had seen this scenario play out many times before. That night, unable to sleep and troubled by the day's events, Ensign Soto decided to visit the training facility for some extra practice. He prided himself on his preparation, and the failure of Team 4's extraction plan still bothered him. The facility was supposed to be empty at 3 a.m., so he was surprised to see lights on in the combat training room. Approaching quietly, he peered through the window in the door. Inside, Zaira was moving through a series of combat techniques he'd never seen before. Her movements were fluid yet precise, combining elements of several martial disciplines with what appeared to be improvised adaptations for real-world combat situations. She executed a takedown maneuver that would have been impossible for someone without extensive training, then transitioned immediately into a disarming technique that Soto recognized from advanced close-quarters combat manuals but had never seen performed with such fluidity. Most striking was the complete transformation in her presence. Gone was the quiet, unassuming woman from their classes. This was someone else entirely, a fighter whose every movement spoke of years of hard-won combat experience. When she shifted to practice with a training knife, Soto decided to enter. The door made enough noise to alert her, and by the time he was fully inside, she had already transitioned to basic calisthenics, as though that had been her activity all along. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Just catching up on PT," she replied, her breathing controlled, despite the intensity of what he'd just witnessed. "Those weren't standard exercises you were doing." She straightened, meeting his gaze with an evaluating look. "Sometimes the handbook isn't enough." "Those weren't SEAL techniques," he pressed. "No," she agreed, "they weren't." "So, where did you learn them?" She considered him for a moment. "Does it matter?" "It might, especially if we're going to be on the same team again." She nodded slightly, acknowledging the point. "Field adaptations. Things that work when the situation isn't textbook." "And you've been in those non-textbook situations?" Instead of answering directly, she asked, "Why did you join the program, Soto?" He was thrown by the question but answered honestly. "To serve at the highest level, to be part of something elite." "Good reasons," she said, "but the real test isn't here. It's out there, when everything goes wrong, and the only thing between life and death is what you can adapt on the spot." The statement hung between them, carrying the weight of personal experience that Soto couldn't dismiss. "You should get some rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be challenging." As he left, Soto couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just glimpsed something important. The next day, he began researching the combat techniques he'd witnessed, finding disturbing connections to classified Joint Special Forces operations that weren't supposed to be taught to anyone below the highest clearance levels. The following afternoon brought a rigorous training exercise, a timed course that combined endurance, strength, and tactical decision-making under physical stress. The recruits ran with full gear, stopped to engage targets, solve tactical problems, and continued to the next station. Halfway through the course, Soto noticed something he'd missed before. As Zaira navigated a particularly demanding obstacle, she momentarily favored her right leg. It was subtle, the kind of adaptation someone makes when compensating for an old injury, but it was there. When the exercise ended, the recruits dispersed to clean their gear and recover. Soto mentioned his observation to Mercer, whose medical background as a rescue swimmer gave him a different perspective. "I noticed it too," Mercer confirmed. "There's definitely something with that right leg. Not enough to impact performance significantly, but it's there." "An injury washout maybe," Soto speculated. "Someone who got a second chance?" Mercer shook his head. "Doesn't explain the skill level or the special treatment from command." Their speculation was interrupted when they noticed Zaira slipping away from the main group, heading toward a maintenance building instead of the barracks. Curiosity piqued, they followed at a discreet distance. Through a partially open door, they glimpsed her in a moment of vulnerability. She had removed her boot and was rolling up her pant leg, revealing what appeared to be a specialized medical device attached to her thigh. It wasn't a simple brace or support, but something far more advanced, with components that suggested cutting-edge technology. She applied some kind of adjustment to the device, her expression momentarily showing the concentration of someone managing chronic pain. Mercer froze, recognition dawning on his face. "That's vertebrae tech," he whispered to Soto. "I've only seen it once before. Guy was Tier 1, got hit bad in Syria. They developed it to keep high-value operators in the field after career-ending injuries." As they watched, Zaira suddenly looked up, directly at their position. Their eyes met through the gap in the door, and both men knew immediately that she was aware of their presence and exactly what they'd seen. "You'll want to forget you saw that, Chief," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. Instead of confronting them further, she simply returned to adjusting the device, an implicit dismissal that somehow carried more authority than any reprimand could have. Soto and Mercer withdrew, both shaken by the implication of what they had witnessed. The vertebrae program was classified at the highest levels, available only to operators whose skills were deemed irreplaceable by the highest echelons of military command. "Who the hell is she?" Soto muttered as they walked away. "Someone way above our pay grade," Mercer replied, "and I'm starting to think we should be very careful about how we approach this situation." That night, driven by a combination of curiosity and growing concern, Petty Officer Thatch decided to take matters into his own hands. Using skills he wasn't supposed to have, he bypassed the security on the administrative building and slipped inside, making his way to the records office. Finding Zaira's personnel file proved surprisingly easy, which immediately made him suspicious. The folder was sitting in plain view on the desk, as though someone had been reviewing it recently and perhaps expected it to be found. Opening it, he discovered it was nearly empty. Just a single photograph and a cover sheet with minimal information. The photo showed Zaira in combat gear with the face blacked out, standing beside Commander Blackwood in what appeared to be a desert location. Both were covered in dust, and there were signs of recent combat in the background. At the bottom of the page was a partially redacted designation: Operation Kingfisher, SEAL Team, DARS, Specialized Combat Operative. The rest of the file was empty, with no history, training records, or performance evaluations. It was as though someone had deliberately created the thinnest possible personnel record, just enough to establish a presence in the system without revealing anything of substance. Thatch photographed the page with his phone and carefully returned the file exactly as he'd found it. His heart was racing as he slipped back out of the building, suddenly aware that he might have stumbled into something far more significant than a simple administrative anomaly. When he returned to the barracks, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. His footlocker had been opened, the contents disturbed in a way that would be imperceptible to most, but was obvious to someone with his background. Someone had searched his belongings while he was gone, with professional precision that left almost no trace. It was a warning, clear as day. "You're being watched. We know what you did." The next morning, the four men met in secret, away from the barracks and training areas, to share what they had learned about Zaira Naji. "She's not admin," Soto stated flatly. "Those combat techniques I saw her practicing are classified Ghost Division protocols, not the kind of thing you pick up in standard training." "The tech in her leg," Mercer added. "It's experimental, Pentagon-level clearance, costs more than what most of us will earn in a lifetime. They don't waste that kind of resource on just anyone." "Her file had Commander Blackwood in it," Thatch said, showing them the photo on his phone. "They've worked together before. Operation Kingfisher, whatever that is." Frost, still unwilling to accept the implications, shook his head. "This is ridiculous. If she was really some elite operator, why would she be here with trainees? It doesn't make sense." "That's an excellent question, Lieutenant Frost," a voice said from the doorway. They turned to see Commander Blackwood standing there, his expression grave. None of them had heard him approach, a disturbing lapse for men trained to be constantly aware of their surroundings. "Tomorrow's exercise has been changed," Blackwood announced. "Live ammunition, full combat conditions." The four men exchanged alarmed glances. Live ammunition exercises were rare and always announced well in advance with extensive safety protocols. "Sir, what's the mission parameter?" Soto asked. "You'll be briefed at 0500, Blackwood replied. "I suggest you all get some rest. You're going to need it." As he turned to leave, he paused. "And, gentlemen, I'd advise against any further unauthorized investigations. Some questions have answers you're not cleared to hear." With that cryptic warning, he left them standing in stunned silence, each man wondering exactly what they had stumbled into and how tomorrow's exercise would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman in their midst. We all underestimate people based on appearances. Have you ever misjudged someone who later proved to be extraordinary? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you want to see what happens next in this tale of hidden strength and unexpected courage. Dawn broke over the training facility with an oppressive heat that promised a brutal day ahead. Class 238 assembled on the parade ground at 0500 sharp, each man carrying full combat gear and looking more solemn than usual. The standard banter and competitive jabs were absent, replaced by a tense silence that spoke volumes about their state of mind. Commander Blackwood stood before them, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Behind him, Lieutenant Commander Tiernan conferred quietly with two other instructors, occasionally glancing at the assembled class. "Gentlemen," Blackwood began, his voice carrying easily across the still, morning air. "Today's exercise represents a significant escalation in your training. You've mastered the fundamentals. You've proven yourselves capable in controlled scenarios. Now, we test your ability to function under conditions that more closely approximate actual combat." He gestured to a large tactical display that had been set up nearby. "Operation Redstone, a hostage extraction in hostile territory with active opposition forces. Live ammunition will be in play." A murmur ran through the group. Live fire exercises were rare at this stage of training and never announced with so little preparation. The operation area has been secured and safety protocols are in place, but make no mistake, this is as real as we can make it without actually deploying you to a combat zone. Decisions have consequences today. Bad decisions will result in mission failure and potentially injuries. His eyes scanned the group, lingering momentarily on Frost, Soto, Thatch, and Mercer. "You will operate in the same teams as the previous exercise. Team leaders, collect your mission packets from Lieutenant Commander Tiernan. You have 1 hour for planning, then we move out." As the teams broke to collect their packets and begin planning, there was no sign of Zaira. Her absence was immediately noticed by Team 4. "Where's Naji?" Thatch asked, looking around. "Isn't she supposed to be with us?" "Maybe she's been reassigned," Soto suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't believe it. "Or maybe this is about her somehow." "Focus on the mission," Mercer advised. "Whatever's going on, we still have an operation to plan." Team 4 received their packet from Tiernan, who offered no explanation for Zaira's absence. Inside was a detailed briefing on Operation Redstone, including satellite imagery, building schematics, and intelligence reports on the opposition forces they would face. "This is intense," Thatch said as they reviewed the materials. "Almost like a real operation." "Maybe it is," Soto mused. "Has anyone considered that this might not be just training?" The thought hung in the air as they continued planning, the implications too disturbing to fully process. Across the facility, Zaira sat alone in the command center, reviewing the same operation briefing. She wore not the loose-fitting training uniform of recent days, but a custom combat suit that fit her athletic frame perfectly. The material was unlike standard issue, with subtle reinforcements at key points and specialized compartments for equipment. Commander Blackwood entered, closing the door behind him. "Are we clear on the parameters, Operator Naji?" "Crystal clear, sir," she replied, her demeanor entirely professional, all traces of the quiet, unassuming trainee gone. "Though I question the wisdom of using Class 238 for this evaluation. They're not ready." "That's precisely why we're doing it," Blackwood countered. "Pentagon wants real-world assessment of training effectiveness. These men are 8 weeks from potential deployment. We need to know if they'll break. And if they do, then we've saved lives by identifying the weakness now, rather than in the field." He paused, studying her expression. "Does this bring back memories?" "Mosul," she acknowledged, a brief shadow crossing her face. "Similar parameters, very different outcome. That's why you're here. No one knows better than you how badly things can go wrong when operators aren't properly prepared." He checked his watch. "Briefing in 10 minutes. After that, they're all yours." When he left, Zaira remained still for a moment, her hand unconsciously moving to her right leg, where the advanced medical device maintained function in limb that by all rights should have ended her career. The memories surfaced despite her best efforts to suppress them. The embassy in Mosul, the unexpected suicide bomber, the searing pain and desperate evacuation under fire. She had been the only survivor, a fact that brought no comfort. She pushed the thoughts away and focused on the mission at hand. Today wasn't about her past. It was about preventing others from sharing her fate. Meanwhile, Team 4 had developed their approach plan for Operation Redstone. Without Zaira's input, they had reverted to more conventional tactics, planning a 2-pronged assault on the target building where the hostage was being held. "Standard approach from the south, using the tree line for cover," Soto outlined. "Secondary team circles around for breach from the east side, creating a diversion that allows the primary team to reach the hostage." "Who takes what position?" Thatch asked. "You and I will handle the main approach," Soto decided. "Mercer, you'll create the diversion on the east side." "That leaves us 1 man short," Mercer pointed out. "Not ideal for either team." "We adapt," Soto said firmly. "Unless Naji shows up, this is what we've got." As they finalized their plan, Lieutenant Commander Tiernan approached their position. "Change of plans, Team 4. You're operating independently from the other teams. Your mission has been modified." He handed Soto a sealed envelope. "New parameters, for your eyes only until deployment." "Sir, we're still down a team member," Soto pointed out. "Naji hasn't reported in." "That situation is being addressed," Tiernan replied cryptically. "Be at Transport Area B in 20 minutes, full gear." When he left, the 3 men exchanged concerned looks. "What the hell is going on?" Thatch muttered. "I don't know," Soto admitted, breaking the seal on the envelope. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." The new orders were brief and direct. Team 4 was to proceed to a separate operation zone 5 miles from the main exercise area. They would receive final briefing upon arrival. The mission was classified as Priority Alpha, a designation usually reserved for actual combat operations, not training exercises. 20 minutes later, they boarded a transport helicopter, still, without any sign of Zaira or any explanation for their separate assignment. As they lifted off, they could see the other teams deploying to the main exercise area below. "Anyone else feel like we're being singled out?" Thatch asked over the roar of the rotors. "Definitely," Mercer confirmed. "Question is, why?" The helicopter banked away from the base, heading toward a more remote area of the training grounds. After a 10-minute flight, they set down in a clearing next to what appeared to be a forward operating base setup. Several non-standard vehicles were parked nearby, and a small command post had been established. As they disembarked, Commander Blackwood emerged from the command post, accompanied by a figure they immediately recognized despite the dramatic change in appearance. Zaira approached them dressed in full combat gear that marked her as something entirely different from the trainee they'd known. Her equipment was specialized and clearly customized for her specific requirements, including the advanced medical device now partially visible on her right leg. She carried herself with unmistakable authority, all pretense of being just another recruit completely abandoned. "Gentlemen," Blackwood greeted them, "welcome to the real Operation Redstone." Inside the command post, the true nature of their situation was revealed. Digital displays showed satellite imagery and real-time drone footage of a compound several miles away. Intelligence reports and personnel files were organized on a tactical table. "This is not a training exercise," Blackwood explained. "At least, not entirely. The compound you see here contains a high-value intelligence asset who needs extraction. Opposition forces in the area are real, though they've been instructed to use simulated ammunition only." "You're using us for an actual operation?" Soto asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "We're evaluating your readiness for actual deployment while simultaneously conducting necessary field training for specialized operatives," Blackwood clarified, specifically Operator Naji. All eyes turned to Zaira, who stood by the tactical display, reviewing the intelligence with professional focus. "Operator Naji has been with the Ghost Division for the past 7 years, Blackwood continued. "After a career-altering injury in Mosul 3 years ago, she's been serving in a training and evaluation capacity. Today marks her return to operational status, albeit in a controlled environment." "So, we're what, guinea pigs?" Frost asked from the doorway, his unexpected appearance startling everyone. Blackwood's expression hardened. "Lieutenant Frost, you were not assigned to this operation." "No, sir, I wasn't," Frost agreed, stepping fully into the command post. "But when I saw Team 4 being airlifted to a separate location, I made a judgment call to follow and provide support if needed." His eyes locked with Zaira's, especially when I realized who was really running this show. The tension in the room was palpable. Zaira's expression remained neutral, but her posture shifted subtly, a change that didn't go unnoticed by Mercer or Soto. "Your initiative is noted, Lieutenant," Blackwood said after a moment. "Since you're here, you might as well join Team 4. They're short a member, and this provides another data point for our evaluation." Frost nodded, moving to stand with the others, though he positioned himself slightly apart, his body language making it clear he wasn't fully integrated with the team. "Operator Naji will command this extraction," Blackwood announced. "Her evaluation of your performance will go directly into your deployment readiness assessment. I suggest you treat this as the real operation it is." With that, he left the command post, leaving Team 4 alone with Zaira. For a long moment, no one spoke. The transformation before them was so complete that they struggled to reconcile this confident, clearly elite operator with the quiet, unassuming woman they'd dismissed and mistreated. "You were evaluating us all along," Soto finally said, not a question, but a statement. "Yes," Zaira confirmed, "by order of Naval Special Warfare Command. Your class is being fast-tracked for deployment due to operational requirements in the Persian Gulf. Command wanted an independent assessment of your readiness." "So everything was a lie," Frost said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "The quiet act, pretending you couldn't keep up, all of it." "Not everything," she replied. "The injury is real. The combat experience is real. The only deception was in my role and purpose at the training facility." "Why the charade?" Thatch asked. "Why not just tell us you were evaluating us?" "Because operators in the field don't get warnings," she said simply. "You perform as you are, not as you think you should be when being observed. We needed authentic responses." She turned to the tactical display. "Now, we have an operation to plan. The compound is 2 miles from our current position. 4 buildings, 8 to 10 opposition forces, 1 asset to extract. We move in 1 hour." The shift to operational planning was immediate and professional. Whatever personal feelings the men might have had about the deception, they were trained to compartmentalize and focus on the mission at hand. Zaira outlined her approach, incorporating elements of the plan Team 4 had already developed, but refining it with insights that clearly came from extensive field experience. "Soto and Thatch, you'll approach from the south as planned. Mercer and Frost, east side entry, but only after my signal. I'll infiltrate from the north, using the drainage culvert for cover. The primary target is in the central building, 2nd floor, east room." "That's a 3-team approach with only 5 operators," Mercer observed. "Spread thin." "We adjust to conditions," Zaira replied. "I'll be operating solo for the north approach." "That's the most exposed position," Frost pointed out, a challenge in his voice. "Yes," she acknowledged without elaboration. "Questions on the operational parameters?" There were none, at least none related to the mission. The personal questions remained unasked, hanging in the air between them. As they prepared their gear for deployment, Mercer found himself working alongside Zaira, checking ammunition and communications equipment. "The leg," he said quietly. "Mosul?" She glanced at him, then returned to her equipment check. "Embassy bombing, 3 years ago. I was the security lead." "Ghost Division," he said. "I've heard rumors. Never thought I'd meet one." "You still haven't," she replied. "Officially, we don't exist. And unofficially?" She paused, considering her response. "Unofficially, we go where others can't, do what others won't, and never ever appear in the mission reports." "Like Kingfisher," Thatch said, joining them. "The operation in your file." Zaira's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "You've been busy." "Just curious about who was evaluating us," he replied. "Curiosity has consequences, Petty Officer Thatch. Remember that when you're in the field." She closed her equipment case with finality. "Gear up. We move in 15. As they prepared to deploy, Soto approached Frost, who was checking his weapon with mechanical precision, his face set in hard lines. "You need to let it go," Soto advised quietly. "Let what go?" Frost responded, not looking up. "Whatever issue you have with Naji. For this operation to succeed, we need to function as a unit." "We're being tested like lab rats," Frost muttered. "And she's been watching us, judging us, this whole time. Doesn't that bother you?" "Of course it does," Soto admitted. "But right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is completing the mission successfully. Personal feelings come later." Frost finally looked up, his expression conflicted. "You sound like my father." "Your father was a SEAL. He would tell you the same thing." After a moment, Frost nodded, a grudging acknowledgement of the point. "For the mission," he agreed. "But afterward, I want answers." "We all do," Soto assured him. "Let's make sure we're around to get them." They moved out as planned, approaching the target compound through dense woodland that provided good cover but challenging terrain. Zaira took point initially, leading them to the final staging area before they would split into their assigned teams. Her movements through the forest were a revelation to the men following her. Where they moved with the careful precision of well-trained soldiers, she seemed to flow through the environment, almost a part of it. She never disturbed branches, never snapped twigs, her footfalls silent even on the leaf-covered ground. At the staging point, a fallen log offering concealment from the compound ahead, she stopped and turned to them. "Final equipment check," she ordered quietly. "Comms test." Each man verified his equipment and tested this secure communication system. All systems showed operational. "Remember, this is a controlled operation, but the opposition forces don't know that," Zaira reminded them. "They're operating under the assumption that this is a standard training exercise with simulated ammunition. Our rounds are also simulated, but they'll cause pain and bruising. Aim as though they're real." She looked each man in the eye, her gaze lingering for a moment on Frost. "Follow your training, trust your instincts, support your team. That's how you survive in the field." With that, she melted away into the forest, heading toward her solo insertion point, leaving the men to deploy to their assigned positions. As Soto and Thatch moved toward the southern approach, Thatch couldn't contain his questions any longer. "What do you make of all this?" he whispered. "Ghost Division, secret evaluations, live operations disguised as training?" "I think we've stumbled into something way above our clearance level," Soto replied, keeping his voice low. "And I think Naji is a lot more important than we realized." "Important enough for that tech in her leg," Thatch agreed. "That's millions in R&D right there." "Focus on the mission," Soto reminded him. "Questions later." Meanwhile, Mercer and Frost made their way to the eastern approach point, maintaining radio silence as instructed. The compound was now visible through the trees, a cluster of buildings surrounded by a perimeter fence. Guards patrolled in standard patterns, looking alert, but not especially concerned. "This feels wrong," Frost murmured as they set up their position. "Training exercise or not, we're being manipulated." "By people with the authority to do so," Mercer pointed out. "That's the military for you." "It's not just that," Frost insisted. "Why us? Why this particular mission? There's something else going on here." Before Mercer could respond, their comms crackled to life with Zaira's voice, cool and professional. "All teams in position. Operation commences on my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute." The operation began with precision timing. Soto and Thatch created a diversion at the south entrance, drawing the attention of several guards. Mercer and Frost used the distraction to approach the eastern perimeter, preparing to breach the fence as planned. What none of them saw was Zaira's approach from the north. Using the drainage culvert as cover, she had infiltrated the compound perimeter without detection. Her movement through the compound was ghost-like, avoiding guard patterns with an intuitive understanding of their blind spots. The first indication the others had of her presence inside was when two guards on the north side suddenly dropped, hit by precision shots from her position. "North entrance secure," her voice came through the comms. "East team, move in. South team, maintain diversion for 30 more seconds, then proceed to secondary entrance." The operation continued to unfold according to plan, each team executing their assigned roles with professional efficiency. Despite their personal feelings, the men of Team 4 responded to Zaira's commands without hesitation, the training and discipline of years taking precedence over recent revelations. Inside the main building, Zaira encountered unexpected resistance. 3 guards, rather than the anticipated one, were stationed outside the room containing the asset. She evaluated the situation in seconds, then made a decision. "Change of plan," she announced over comms. "East team, redirect to central building, second floor, east corridor. South team, secure the ground floor and hold position." The teams acknowledged and adjusted accordingly. Frost and Mercer entered the main building and moved quickly to the second floor, encountering one guard, who they neutralized efficiently. When they reached the east corridor, they found a situation in flux. 2 guards were down, clearly taken out by Zaira. A third was engaged in close quarters combat with her, while a fourth was moving to flank her position. Without hesitation, Frost took aim and neutralized the fourth guard with a precision shot. The momentary distraction allowed Zaira to dispatch her opponent with a combat technique that Frost recognized from her demonstration in the training facility. Their eyes met briefly across the corridor, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Whatever his personal feelings, Frost had made the professional choice in that critical moment. "Asset secured," Zaira announced, moving to the door the guards had been protecting. "East team, hold position. South team, prepare for extraction." Inside the room, they found not a person as expected, but a sealed case containing what appeared to be intelligence materials. Zaira verified the contents with a quick check, then secured the case. "Package ready for transport," she reported. "All teams, begin exfiltration, standard pattern, south exit." The extraction proceeded smoothly, with all teams converging at the south exit point and withdrawing to their original staging area without further contact with opposition forces. The entire operation had taken less than 15 minutes from start to finish. Back at the staging area, Zaira performed a quick assessment of the team. No injuries, all equipment intact, mission successful by every metric. "Well executed," she told them, her tone professional, but with a note of genuine approval. South team's diversion was textbook. East team's adaptation to changing conditions was excellent. "And your solo infiltration?" Frost asked, unable to keep a hint of challenge from his voice. "Accomplished its objective," she replied simply. "The mission was successful. That's what matters." As they began the trek back to the command post, Zaira took point again, the case containing the intelligence secured to her back. The men followed, each lost in his own thoughts about what had just transpired. Upon their return, they found Commander Blackwood, waiting with Lieutenant Commander Tiernan. The debriefing was thorough but focused entirely on operational aspects, with no mention of the unusual circumstances surrounding the mission. "Assets secured, no casualties, mission parameters met," Blackwood summarized. "A successful operation by any standard." He dismissed the men with instructions to return to the main facility for standard post-operation procedures. As they prepared to board the transport helicopter, Zaira pulled Soto aside. "Your team performed well," she told him, "especially considering the circumstances." "Thank you, ma'am," he replied formally, still adjusting to the new dynamic between them. "You have questions," she observed. "That's understandable." "Many," he admitted. "But I'm not sure this is the time or place." She nodded, appreciating his restraint. "There will be a full briefing tomorrow. Some of your questions will be answered then." "And the ones that won't?" She met his gaze directly. "Some answers aren't mine to give, Ensign Soto. That's the nature of our work." As the helicopter lifted off, returning the men to the main training facility, an uneasy silence prevailed. The successful mission had demonstrated their capabilities as operators, but had also raised far more questions than it had answered. Back at the base, the mood in the barracks that evening was subdued. The other teams had completed their standard training exercise, unaware of the real operation that Team 4 had participated in. When questioned about their separate assignment, Team 4 maintained operational security, revealing nothing. Late that night, unable to sleep, Frost found himself walking the perimeter of the base, trying to process the day's events. The clear night sky was filled with stars, a stark contrast to the murky situation he found himself in. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed the figure seated on a bench near the beach, gazing out at the ocean. Zaira sat alone, still dressed in her combat uniform, the moonlight reflecting off the advanced medical device on her leg, which she had left uncovered. Something made him approach rather than withdraw unseen. Perhaps it was the need for answers, or perhaps something more fundamental, a recognition of a fellow warrior in a moment of vulnerability. She was aware of his presence immediately, of course, but made no move to acknowledge him until he was standing directly beside the bench. "Lieutenant Frost," she said, not looking up. "Operator Naji," he replied, the formal address feeling strange on his tongue after days of thinking of her as just another trainee. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Too many questions." She nodded, understanding. "That's natural after your first real operation." "Was it real?" he challenged. "Or just another test?" "Both," she admitted. "The asset was actual intelligence. The opposition forces were instructors in disguise. The extraction was necessary. Your evaluation was continuous." She finally looked up at him. "Your father would have been proud of how you performed today." The statement caught him off guard. "You knew my father?" "I served with him, briefly, before Kandahar." Frost felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. His father had died in an operation in Kandahar 5 years ago, the details classified beyond his access despite his own military clearance. "He was a good man," Zaira continued, "an excellent operator. He saved my life once, at considerable risk to his own." "That sounds like him," Frost said quietly, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. "You have his instincts," she observed, "but you lack his humility. That's dangerous in our line of work." The criticism, delivered without heat or judgment, still stung. "Is that why you singled me out? Because of my father?" "No," she replied. "You were selected for evaluation based on your own record, not your family connections. Though the connection did make your reactions particularly interesting to observe." She gestured to the bench beside her, an invitation to sit. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted. "Tomorrow at 0900, your team will receive a full briefing on Operation Lazarus," she told him. "The ongoing evaluation of SEAL training effectiveness and combat readiness. Your participation in today's operation will be officially recognized, though the details remain classified." And then your training continues," she said simply, "with some modifications based on today's performance." "Will you continue as our evaluator?" he asked, surprised by his own ambivalence about the answer. "In a more official capacity, yes. The pretense has served its purpose." They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of waves breaking on the shore, the only interruption. "The leg," Frost finally said. "Mosul, what happened?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she might not answer. When she did, her voice was softer, touched with a memory that clearly still haunted her. "Embassy security detail. Standard protection mission, until it wasn't." She paused, looking out at the dark water. "Suicide bomber breached the perimeter. I identified the threat too late. The explosion killed 17 people, including 3 children who were there for a cultural exchange program. And you survived." "Barely," she acknowledged. "The medical team said I should have lost the leg. Would have, without the vertebrae program." "So they rebuilt you," Frost observed. "Why? There are other operators." "Not with my particular skill set," she replied. "And more importantly, not with my particular failure. The best teachers are those who have experienced the worst consequences of their mistakes." The implication hung in the air between them. Her role was not just evaluation, but prevention, using her hard-won experience to ensure that others didn't repeat her errors. "Tomorrow's briefing," she said, standing up. "Zoro 900, don't be late, Lieutenant." She walked away, her gait betraying only the slightest hint of the catastrophic injury she had survived. Frost remained on the bench, watching her disappear into the darkness, more questions swirling in his mind than before their conversation. The next morning, Team 4 assembled in a secure briefing room at precisely 0900. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation as they waited for the promised explanations. When the door opened, it wasn't Commander Blackwood or Zaira who entered, but a man none of them recognized. He wore no uniform, no insignia, nothing to indicate his rank or affiliation. Yet his bearing and the immediate deference shown by the base personnel accompanying him spoke volumes about his authority. "Gentlemen," he addressed them, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to command. "My name is Director Hargrove. Welcome to Operation Lazarus." The screens around the room activated, displaying classified designations and operation parameters that made the true scope of their situation suddenly, shockingly clear. They weren't just being evaluated for standard deployment, they were being assessed for selection into something far more specialized, far more classified, and far more dangerous than anything they had imagined. And Zaira Naji wasn't just their evaluator. According to the personnel file now displayed on the main screen, she was the operational commander of the unit they were being considered for, her record of service so heavily redacted that only the highest level commendations remained visible. As this revelation sank in, the door opened again. Zaira entered, but not as they had seen her before. She was dressed in a formal uniform none of them recognized, bearing insignia and honors that confirmed the extraordinary nature of her position. The loose-fitting training clothes and even the practical combat gear of the previous day had concealed not just her identity, but her true authority. "Gentlemen," she addressed them, her voice now carrying the full weight of command that had only been hinted at before. "It's time we discussed your future. Have you ever discovered someone in your life was not who they appeared to be? Someone whose quiet competence masked extraordinary abilities? Share your experience below and subscribe to see the shocking conclusion to this story of hidden strength and unexpected courage." The briefing room fell silent as Director Hargrove pulled up additional files on the main screen. Team 4 sat rigid in their chairs, minds racing to process the revelation that had just upended everything they thought they knew. "Operation Lazarus," Hargrove continued, "is a joint naval special warfare and intelligence community initiative designed to identify and rapidly develop next-generation operators for specialized deployment. You 4 represent the top candidates from the current SEAL training cycle." He gestured to Zaira, who stood at parade rest beside him, her bearing impeccable in the unfamiliar uniform, with its specialized insignia. "Commander Naji leads the operational arm of Lazarus. Her assessment of your capabilities carries significant weight in determining your eligibility for selection." Frost's eyes were locked on Zaira, seeing her in an entirely new light. Not just an operator or evaluator, but a commander with authority that extended far beyond the training facility. The specialized uniform she wore bore the subtle insignia of a unit so classified that most of the military didn't know it existed. "Yesterday's operation was your first real-world assessment," Hargrove explained. "The intelligence you recovered was genuine, though of moderate importance. The opposition forces were instructors playing a role, but the tactical situation was authentic. Your performance was monitored and evaluated according to combat standards, not training parameters." He pulled up a tactical display showing the compound they had infiltrated, now with overlays of their movement patterns and decision points highlighted. "Team 4 performed admirably under the circumstances," Zaira stated, addressing them directly for the first time since entering. "Adaptation to changing conditions was excellent. Communication was clear and efficient. Mission execution was successful within acceptable parameters." Her voice carried the crisp authority of a senior officer delivering an official assessment, worlds away from the quiet, restrained persona she had maintained during their training. "However," she continued, "there were notable deficiencies that would have proven problematic in a truly hostile environment." The display shifted to show specific moments from the operation, captured by hidden cameras throughout the compound. "Lieutenant Frost, your approach to the east entrance exposed you to potential sniper fire from the north tower for approximately 7 seconds. In a hostile environment, that would be 5 seconds too many." Frost stiffened slightly but nodded, accepting the critique. Ensign Soto, your diversion was effective but relied too heavily on predictable patterns. Adaptive enemies would have identified the tactic by the third repetition. Soto nodded, mentally filing away the observation. Petty Officer Thatch, your weapons handling was excellent, but your communication during the exfiltration phase was unnecessarily verbose. In combat, brevity equals survival. Thatch's expression remained neutral, though his eyes reflected his recognition of the valid point. Chief Petty Officer Mercer showed the most battlefield awareness, likely due to his prior deployment experience. His positioning during the second-floor clearing was textbook. Mercer acknowledged the rare compliment with a slight nod. Overall assessment, Zaira concluded, is provisional qualification for further evaluation. The final determination will be made following today's exercise. The men exchanged glances. Another exercise? Immediately after this revelation, Director Hargrove took over again. Today's operation represents a significant escalation in complexity and stakes. Unlike yesterday's controlled environment, today you will be operating in what we call a semi-permeable scenario. Meaning, Soto asked. Meaning that while the overall operation is contained, the variables within it are not fully controlled. The opposition forces you will encounter today are not instructors following a script, but independent operators with their own objectives that directly counter yours. They will not be using simulated ammunition. They will be using non-lethal but very real counterinsurgency measures, including flashbangs, smoke, and tactical restraints. The implication was clear. This would be as close to actual combat as possible without deploying to a war zone. Your objective, Zaira continued, is asset denial rather than asset retrieval. You will be defending a position against superior numbers with limited resources. Success is measured by your ability to prevent the opposition from securing the target package for a predetermined time period. The screens displayed a new location, a multi-level structure on the far side of the training grounds that had been configured to resemble an urban environment. The opposition force has been briefed that they are facing a standard SEAL training unit, Hargrove added. They have not been informed of your potential Lazarus qualification or Commander Naji's involvement. This is intentional. We want to evaluate their effectiveness as much as yours. Who exactly are we facing? Frost asked, a slight edge to his voice. Hargrove smiled thinly. A specialized unit similar to your own, Lieutenant. Consider it a peer-level engagement. Will Commander Naji be participating? Mercer inquired. All eyes turned to Zaira, who remained expressionless. Commander Naji will observe, but not directly participate unless operational parameters require intervention, Hargrove replied. This is your evaluation, gentlemen. Make it count. The briefing concluded with detailed tactical information about their defensive position, available resources, and the expected capabilities of the opposition force. They would have 1 hour to prepare before the exercise commenced. As they gathered their gear, Frost found himself next to Zaira, who was studying the tactical display with focused intensity. "Permission to speak freely, Commander?" he asked quietly. She glanced at him. "Granted, Lieutenant. This feels like more than an evaluation. The director's interest, the resources committed, the real intelligence yesterday. There's something else happening here, isn't there?" Zaira considered him for a moment, weighing her response. "Perceptive, Lieutenant Frost. Yes, there are additional operational considerations in play, some of which may become relevant depending on your performance today." "My father," he said, lowering his voice further. "Was he part of Lazarus?" "No," she replied, holding his gaze. "But he was aware of it, and he recommended you for consideration before his final deployment." The revelation hit Frost like a physical blow. His father, who had always pushed him to excel, had seen something in him worthy of this level of selection even before his death. "He believed you had potential beyond standard SEAL operations," Zaira added. "Today is your opportunity to prove him right." Before he could respond, she moved away, joining Hargrove for a private conversation. Frost rejoined his team, his mind racing with implications and possibilities he had never considered. "What was that about?" Soto asked as they collected their tactical gear. "Family history," Frost replied tersely. "Focus on the mission." The hour of preparation passed quickly as Team 4 developed their defensive strategy. The structure they would be defending was a 3-story building with multiple entry points, designed to simulate an embassy or government facility. The asset they needed to protect was located in a secure room on the 2nd floor. Standard defensive perimeter won't work with our numbers, Soto observed as they studied the building schematics. We need to be creative. Asymmetric approach, Mercer suggested. Make them think we're deployed conventionally, then hit them where they don't expect. Psychological tactics, Thatch added. If they believe they're facing standard SEAL trainees, we can use that assumption against them. Frost, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. We need to think like Najee. The others looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? Soto asked. Yesterday, during the extraction, she didn't move like we've been trained. She moved differently, more fluid, less predictable. She knew exactly where the blind spots were in their security setup. Ghost Division tactics, Mercer nodded, understanding. Completely different operational doctrine. Exactly, Frost confirmed. So instead of defending conventionally, we deploy unconventionally. We make ourselves ghosts in our own house. The plan that emerged was unlike anything they had been taught in standard SEAL training. Instead of establishing defensive positions at entry points, they would use the building's infrastructure to their advantage, creating an environment of uncertainty and misdirection. When the hour was up, Director Hargrove and Commander Najee arrived for a final briefing before the exercise commenced. Your defense plan? Hargrove inquired. Frost, now the designated team leader, outlined their approach. As he spoke, he noticed a subtle shift in Zaira's expression, a flicker of approval that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Unconventional, Hargrove noted when Frost finished. Risky. With respect, sir, conventional defense with our numbers would be riskier, Frost responded. We're adapting to the circumstances. As you should, Zaira affirmed. The opposition force has been deployed. They will commence their operation in 15 minutes. From this point forward, all communication will be through secured tactical channels only. As she and Hargrove prepared to depart for the observation post, Zaira paused, looking back at Team 4. Remember your training, she said, but don't be limited by it. With that cryptic advice, she was gone, leaving the 4 men to finalize their preparations for what promised to be the most challenging test of their careers. The opposition force moved into position with practiced efficiency. From the observation post, Zaira and Hargrove watched their deployment through high-definition surveillance feeds. Delta Team Sigma, Hargrove commented. 8 operators, all with multiple combat deployments. They're not taking this lightly. They shouldn't, Zaira replied, her eyes tracking the opposition's movement patterns. Team 4 may be trainees, but they've been selected for their potential. This will be interesting. Inside the target building, Team 4 had implemented their unconventional defense strategy. Rather than manning static positions, they had created an environment of controlled chaos. The building's electrical systems had been modified to allow for selective power failures. Air circulation had been adjusted to carry sound in unpredictable patterns. Several areas had been prepared with non-lethal traps that would disorient rather than harm. Most importantly, they had established a mobile defense pattern that would allow them to appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously, creating the illusion of greater numbers. They're approaching the south entrance, Soto reported through their tactical comms. Standard formation, 4 operators. Understood, Frost acknowledged. Implement Phase 1. Maintain communication discipline from this point forward. The first contact came exactly as expected. 4 operators from Delta Team Sigma breached the south entrance using standard operating procedure for a hostile building entry. They moved with the coordinated precision of experienced combatants, covering angles and clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. What they didn't expect was the complete absence of resistance. No defensive positions, no return fire, not even signs of hasty fortification. Just an empty building with occasional unexplained sounds and shadows that seem to move when viewed peripherally. Building appears unsecured, the Delta team leader reported to his command. Possible withdrawal to interior defensive position. Proceeding to second level. As they moved toward the stairs, the first of Team 4's preparations activated. The lights in the stairwell flickered and died, plunging the space into darkness for 3 seconds before emergency lighting activated, casting everything in a dim red glow. During those 3 seconds, Thatch had moved into position behind the Delta team, placing a small device that would create intermittent sounds of movement from a supply closet they had already cleared. The psychological effect was immediate. The Delta operators tightened formation, suddenly aware that the environment itself seemed to be working against them. Similar scenarios played out as the remaining Delta operators entered through the east and west entrances. Each encountered an environment that seemed to shift and change around them, with occasional glimpses of defenders who disappeared before they could be engaged. In the observation post, Hargrove watched with growing interest. "Impressive psychological warfare," he noted. "They're making Delta chase ghosts." Zaira nodded, a hint of satisfaction in her expression. "They're thinking adaptively, creating asymmetric advantages to counter superior numbers. Your influence, I presume?" "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "Or perhaps they're simply demonstrating why they were selected for evaluation." Back in the building, the operation was entering its critical phase. Delta Team Sigma, growing frustrated with the elusive defense, had consolidated their forces for a direct push to the secure room on the second floor where the asset was located. "All Delta elements converging on second floor," Mercer reported from his observation position. "Implementing Phase 2. Phase 2 of Team 4's defense plan was more direct than the psychological warfare of Phase 1. As Delta pushed toward the secure room, they would find themselves caught in a carefully orchestrated series of non-lethal countermeasures designed to disrupt their cohesion and communication. The first was a localized electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disabled their tactical communications within a 15-foot radius of the secure room. The second was a series of unexpected defensive positions that appeared where none had been detected before. Frost, who had positioned himself in a maintenance crawlspace above the main corridor, dropped down behind the Delta team as they approached the secure room. In the momentary confusion, he neutralized two operators with precision shots from his non-lethal weapon before disappearing into a pre-planned exit route. Simultaneously, Soto and Thatch engaged from flanking positions, creating the impression of a much larger defensive force converging from multiple directions. The Delta team, professionals to the core, adjusted quickly. They established a defensive perimeter while assessing the new threat, their training allowing them to function effectively even with compromised communications. "They're adapting," Mercer warned over Team 4's still functional comms. "Reorganizing for a final push." "Implement Phase 3, Frost ordered. "Full spectrum defense, rotating positions, maintain asset security at all costs." Phase 3 was the most direct confrontation of their plan. No more shadows and misdirection. Team 4 would engage the opposition directly, using rapid position changes and coordinated crossfire to maximize their defensive effectiveness. What followed was 15 minutes of intense close-quarters combat. Simulation. Delta Team Sigma, now fully aware they faced a more sophisticated defense than expected, brought their considerable experience to bear. Team 4, fighting with the innovative tactics they had developed, managed to maintain asset security despite being outnumbered. In the observation post, Zaira watched the confrontation with growing concern. Something had changed in the Delta team's approach, a subtle shift in tactics that suggested they might have identified a vulnerability in Team 4's defense. "They're adapting too quickly," she observed. "This isn't standard Delta protocol." Hargrove studied the feeds with renewed interest. "No, it's not. Almost as if they've been briefed on unconventional defense strategies. Or they've encountered them before," Zaira added, her suspicion growing. "Specifically, Ghost Division tactics." She reached for the secure communication system. "This exercise needs additional variables. Permission to intervene?" Hargrove considered for a moment, then nodded. "Approved, Commander. Assess and adjust as needed." Inside the building, the situation was deteriorating for Team 4. Delta had identified the pattern in their rotating defense and was systematically exploiting it, gradually pushing closer to the secure room containing the asset. "They've adapted to our rotation," Soto reported, breathing heavily after a close engagement. 2 minutes until they breached the secure room." "Maintain position," Frost ordered, though he knew their options were limited. "We hold until the exercise concludes." Just then, their tactical comms activated with a new voice. "Team 4, this is Commander Naji, implementing command override. New tactical designation, Kingfisher Protocol." The four men exchanged confused glances. This hadn't been part of their briefing. Acknowledge receipt of Kingfisher Protocol, Zaira's voice insisted. Team 4 acknowledges Kingfisher Protocol, Frost responded, unsure what this meant. Kingfisher active in 60 seconds. Prepare for environmental shift. Before any of them could question the cryptic message, the building's emergency systems activated without warning. Fire alarms blared, sprinklers engaged, and emergency lighting shifted to full evacuation mode. In the sudden chaos, new tactical instructions appeared on their communication devices, outlining a completely different defensive approach that none of them had planned. "What the hell?" Thatch muttered. "It's a test within the test," Mercer realized. "Adapt or fail." They implemented the new tactics without hesitation, using the environmental disruption to completely reorganize their defense. The result was immediate and dramatic. Delta Team Sigma, who had been on the verge of breaching the secure room, suddenly found themselves facing a defense they couldn't predict or counter. In the observation post, Hargrove watched the sudden reversal with surprise. Kingfisher Protocol? That wasn't in the exercise parameters. "No," Zaira agreed. "It was a test of my suspicion. Delta adapted too quickly to Team 4's unconventional tactics because they were briefed on Ghost Division protocols. Someone leaked operational information." "Impossible," Hargrove protested. "Those protocols are classified at the highest level." "And yet," Zaira pointed to the screen, where Delta was clearly struggling against the new defensive pattern, "they recognized and countered Ghost Division tactics until we implemented Kingfisher, which is a protocol I developed after Mosul. It has never been documented or shared outside my direct command." Hargrove's expression darkened. "This changes the operational security assessment for Lazarus." "Yes," Zaira agreed. "But it also confirms something else. Team 4 adapted to an unprecedented tactical shift in under 60 seconds. That's not training, that's pure operational instinct." Inside the building, the exercise was reaching its conclusion. Team 4, operating on the new Kingfisher Protocol, had successfully prevented Delta from reaching the asset until the predetermined time expired. As the all-clear signal sounded, both teams stood down, the intensity of the simulated combat giving way to professional acknowledgement of a challenging exercise. The Delta team leader, a seasoned operator with multiple combat deployments, approached Frost with grudging respect. "Impressive defense, Lieutenant. Didn't expect trainees to implement ghost tactics." Frost exchanged glances with his team, all of them registering the significance of the statement. How did Delta know about Ghost Division tactics, which were supposedly classified beyond their access? "We adapt to the situation," Frost replied carefully. "As I'm sure you would." "Sure," the Delta leader nodded, "but that last shift was something else entirely, almost like someone changed the rules mid-game." Before Frost could respond, Commander Naji and Director Hargrove entered the building, their expressions grave. The atmosphere shifted immediately. The standard post-exercise camaraderie replaced by a tension that everyone felt, but few understood. "Delta Team Sigma, you are dismissed to debrief with your command," Hargrove ordered. "Team 4, remain for specialized assessment." As Delta withdrew, Zaira approached Team 4, her bearing even more formal than before. "The exercise has revealed significant findings beyond your tactical performance," she informed them. "Your adaptability under Kingfisher Protocol has been noted and will factor into your final assessment." "Commander," Frost ventured, "the Delta leader mentioned ghost tactics. How would he know about classified operational protocols?" "An excellent question, Lieutenant," Zaira replied, her tone revealing nothing. "One that has serious security implications for Operation Lazarus." She turned to address all four men. "You will proceed to secure Briefing Room Alpha for immediate debriefing. The nature of your evaluation has changed significantly in the past 30 minutes. As they gathered their gear, Mercer moved closer to Frost. "What just happened?" he asked quietly. "I think we just became part of something much bigger than a selection process," Frost replied, watching as Zaira conferred with Hargrove, their body language suggesting a serious security concern. The debriefing that followed was unlike anything the men had experienced before. Secure Briefing Room Alpha was a windowless space with technology far beyond standard military issue. As they entered, additional security personnel verified their identities before sealing the room. Director Hargrove wasted no time on preliminaries. "Gentlemen, what you experienced today was not just an evaluation of your capabilities, but an unwitting participation in a counterintelligence operation. The screens around the room activated, showing detailed profiles of each member of Delta Team Sigma, with particular focus on their team leader. For the past 6 months, we've been investigating a potential security breach within our specialized units, Hargrove continued. Classified tactical information has appeared in operations conducted by hostile forces against American interests abroad. Today's exercise confirmed our suspicions. Delta new Ghost Division protocols, Frost stated, the implications becoming clear. Yes, Zaira confirmed, stepping forward. Protocols that exist only in the operational memory of Ghost Division commanders and a handful of cleared personnel. They are never documented, never taught in any formal setting, and never shared outside the division. Yet Delta countered them effectively, Soto observed. Precisely, Hargrove nodded. Which means someone with direct knowledge of Ghost Division tactics has shared that information, either willingly or unknowingly. Kingfisher was a trap, Mercer realized, a protocol that doesn't exist in any documentation. Correct, Chief, Zaira acknowledged. Kingfisher is a tactical approach I developed after Mosul, but never implemented or documented. Its only existence is in my operational planning. The fact that Delta struggled against it confirms they were briefed specifically on known ghost protocols, but not on my personal tactical innovations. So what happens now? Thatch asked, looking between Hargrove and Zaira. Now, Hargrove replied, Operation Lazarus enters a new phase. The security breach must be identified and contained, which brings us to your situation. He looked at each man in turn, his expression grave. You four have demonstrated exceptional adaptability and operational instinct. More importantly, you've now been exposed to classified information that places you in a unique position. You can't simply return to standard SEAL training. Are we being detained? Frost asked directly. No, Lieutenant, Zaira answered. You're being recruited. The room fell silent as the full implication of her statement registered. Recruited, Soto repeated carefully. For Ghost Division. For a specialized task force within the division, Zaira clarified, focused on identifying and containing the security breach while maintaining operational readiness for critical missions. Under whose command? Mercer inquired. Mine, Zaira stated simply, with Director Hargrove providing oversight and intelligence support. The offer hung in the air, enormous in its implications. This wasn't the standard career path any of them had envisioned when entering SEAL training. It was something far more specialized, far more classified, and potentially far more dangerous. This is voluntary, Hargrove assured them. Declining will not negatively impact your SEAL careers. You'll be debriefed, sworn to secrecy, and returned to your training rotation with appropriate security monitoring. And if we accept? Frost asked, his eyes on Zaira. Immediate transition to specialized training, security clearance upgrades, and deployment readiness within 60 days, she replied. You would operate outside standard military hierarchy with all the challenges and responsibilities that entails. Including operational parameters like Mosul, Soto questioned. A shadow crossed Zaira's face. Including high-risk, minimal support operations in denied areas, yes. We need your decision now, Hargrove added. Operational security requires immediate compartmentalization of this information. The four men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Despite their different backgrounds and initial tensions, the events of the past few days had forged a unit cohesion that transcended standard training. I'm in, Frost said, stepping forward. His father had seen this potential in him, had recommended him for this path. He would honor that faith. Same. Soto nodded, the analyst in him already calculating the implications and possibilities. Wouldn't miss it, Thatch agreed with a grim smile. Mercer, the oldest and most experienced, took a moment longer. One condition, he finally said. We stay together as a unit. No splitting us up for different assignments. Zaira considered this, then nodded. Acceptable. Your effectiveness as a team has been demonstrated. Breaking that dynamic would be counterproductive. Then I'm in, Mercer confirmed. Very well, Hargrove acknowledged. As of this moment, you are officially detached from standard SEAL training and assigned to Special Operations Detachment Ghost, Task Force Lazarus. Your new designation is Ghost Team 4. Commander Naji will be your direct superior and primary training officer, he continued. Your existence within the Ghost Division structure will be known only to those with direct operational need to know. For all official purposes, you remain SEAL trainees on extended specialized training rotation. Zaira stepped forward, her demeanor shifting subtly. The formal commander was still present, but there was something else now, a recognition of their new relationship. Training begins immediately, she informed them. The security breach represents an active threat to operational assets worldwide. We don't have the luxury of standard onboarding procedures. She activated a secure tablet, pulling up operational files that made the scale of their new assignment clear. This is what we're facing. Intelligence suggests at least 3 compromised operations in the past month alone, resulting in mission failure and, in one case, operator casualties. The men studied the information with growing concern, the reality of their new role sinking in. Questions? Zaira asked, though her tone suggested she expected few. Just one, Frost replied. You said my father recommended me for Lazarus before his final deployment. Was his mission compromised by this same security breach? The room fell silent. Zaira's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. That, she said quietly, is part of what we're going to find out, Lieutenant. The implications of her response hit Frost like a physical blow. His father's death, classified and explained away as a training accident, might have been the result of compromised intelligence, the same breach they were now tasked with uncovering. Then we have work to do, he said, his resolve hardening. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of intensive specialized training, unlike anything the men had experienced before. Ghost Division protocols were fundamentally different from standard SEAL operations, emphasizing adaptability, psychological warfare, and unconventional approaches to seemingly impossible missions. Zaira proved to be a demanding but effective commander, pushing them beyond limits they hadn't known they possessed, while simultaneously teaching them to think in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. Standard tactics create standard responses, she explained during one particularly grueling training session. Predictability equals vulnerability. In Ghost Division, we operate in the spaces between expectation and reality. Gradually, the awkwardness of their initial relationship faded as mutual respect took its place. The men came to understand that Zaira's deception during their training had been necessary, not just for their evaluation, but for her own assessment of their character under adverse conditions. For her part, Zaira began to see in them the potential for the kind of operators Ghost Division desperately needed, capable of both following orders and thinking independently when circumstances required it. On the 21st day of their specialized training, Director Hargrove arrived with news that would accelerate their timeline dramatically. We've identified a potential source of the security breach, he informed them in a secure briefing. An upcoming operation in North Africa may provide the opportunity to confirm our suspicions and contain the leak. Operational parameters? Zaira inquired. All business. Asset extraction. With extreme prejudice, Hargrove replied, using the euphemism for a mission that combined rescue and elimination objectives. Intelligence suggests a Ghost Division informant is being held by a non-state actor with ties to our security breach. The informant has critical information that could identify our mole. Timeline? Frost asked. Wheels up in 48 hours, Hargrove stated. Full operational brief tomorrow at ZO 600. After he left, Zaira turned to Ghost Team 4, her expression serious. This accelerates our deployment schedule significantly. You're being thrown into the deep end before completing full Ghost protocol training. Are we ready? Soto asked what they were all thinking. You'll have to be, she replied simply. This operation is too critical to delay, and our standard Ghost teams are deployed elsewhere, or potentially compromised. So we're the clean option, Mercer observed. Unknowns who can't be anticipated by whoever is leaking information. Precisely, Zaira confirmed. Your advantage is that no one outside this room knows you exist as a Ghost Division unit. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of preparation, briefings, and final training adjustments. The mission would take them to a remote location in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, where their informant was allegedly being held in a compound controlled by a sophisticated non-state actor with military capabilities. As they prepared their gear for deployment, Frost found Zaira in the armory, methodically checking her specialized equipment. The advanced medical device on her leg had been upgraded for field operations, with additional reinforcement and tactical modifications. "Commander," he acknowledged, "may I ask you something?" She looked up, noting his serious expression. "Go ahead, Lieutenant." "This informant, the one we're extracting, do they have information about my father's mission?" Zaira set down the equipment she was inspecting. "Yes," she confirmed. "That's one of the reasons your team was selected for this operation. The informant was involved in the intelligence gathering for Operation Sandstorm, your father's final mission. If our security breach extends back that far, they may have information about what really happened in Kandahar." "Thank you for the honesty," Frost said after a moment. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "Finding the truth about your father's mission may not bring the closure you're seeking." "I don't seek closure, Commander. I seek accountability." She studied him, something like approval in her expression. "Then we're aligned in our objectives, Lieutenant. Now finish your preparations. We deploy in 6 hours." The transport plane lifted off in the pre-dawn darkness, carrying Ghost Team 4 and their commander toward their first real mission together. As the lights of the base receded below them, each man reflected on the extraordinary turn of events that had brought them to this moment. For Frost, it was the possibility of finally learning the truth about his father's death. For Soto, the intellectual challenge of operating at the highest levels of specialized warfare. For Thatch, the opportunity to prove himself in an elite unit far beyond what he had ever imagined possible. And for Mercer, the chance to apply his experience in a context where it could make a genuine difference. Zaira moved through the cabin, checking equipment and reviewing operational details with each team member. When she reached Frost, she paused longer than with the others. "Your father would be proud," she said quietly, echoing her earlier statement, but with a new depth of meaning. "Not just of your selection, but of the operator you're becoming." Frost nodded, grateful for the affirmation, but focused on the mission ahead. "We'll get your informant, Commander, and we'll find whoever compromised our operations." "I know you will," she replied with quiet confidence. "That's why I selected you in the first place." As the plane continued its flight toward North Africa and the mission that awaited them, Zaira returned to her seat, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the catastrophe in Mosul that had nearly ended her career to her role in identifying and training the next generation of Ghost Division operators, she had come full circle. The quiet, unassuming woman in the oversized uniform she had portrayed during their training had been a necessary deception. But the commander who now led them into the field was her true self, forged through years of specialized operations and the hard lessons of survival when others had fallen. Looking at Ghost Team 4 as they made their final mission preparations, she felt something she hadn't experienced since Mosul, a cautious optimism that perhaps the future of Ghost Division was in capable hands. Hands that might, in time, take up the mantle she had carried for so long. The sun was rising as they approached Moroccan airspace, casting long shadows across the Atlas Mountains where their target awaited. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, a new chapter was beginning for all of them. A chapter written in the specialized language of operators who worked in the shadows, ghosts in a world that never knew they existed. For Frost, Soto, Thatch, and Mercer, the journey from SEAL trainees to Ghost Division operators had been unexpected and transformative. For Commander Zaira Naji, it represented both a continuation of her mission and the legacy she would eventually leave behind. As the plane began its descent toward the drop zone, Zaira gave the order that would officially begin their first mission as Ghost Team 4. Prepare for insertion. Operation Kingfisher is go. The quiet girl in the oversized uniform had revealed her true identity at last, not just to them, but perhaps to herself as well. The mission ahead would test them all, but the foundation had been laid for something remarkable. A team forged through adversity and mutual respect, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the shadows of global conflict. Have you ever witnessed someone transform from underestimated to extraordinary when given the right opportunity? Someone whose quiet strength was revealed only when faced with the greatest challenges? Share your story of hidden potential in the comments, and subscribe to join us for more tales of courage and unexpected heroes.